Hi, everybody. Welcome. So nice to have all of you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Janet O. I'm the Director of Innovation at Encore.org. And today we are so excited to be hosting this conversation on social isolation and loneliness and what we can do to combat that in our communities. So at Encore.org, we support the work of social entrepreneurs who are bringing the generations together to solve all kinds of social problems. Today, we have 3 of our Gen to Gen Innovation Fellows with us who are fighting social isolation and loneliness across the generations. And we hope that today will be the first in a series of conversations all about intergenerational innovation. So at the end of today's session, we'll ask you for your feedback so you can help us shape future conversations. So here's what we're going to be doing today. It's a quick hour together. The first half, we're going to spend talking with some of our fellows and learning about the work that they're doing. And then in the second half, we'll break into small groups where you'll get to share what you've heard that has inspired you, along with what you yourself are doing in your community around this topic. And then at the very end, we'll come back all together and kind of just share a couple of thoughts on what we're taking away with us. So it's my pleasure to introduce Kasli Killam, who will be our moderator today. After studying solutions for loneliness at the Harvard School of Public Health, Kasli founded Social Health Labs to collaborate on local, state, and national initiatives that promote meaningful human connection. She is also one of our very own Encore Public Voices Fellows, and her ideas about loneliness and connection have been featured in all sorts of places, including the New York Times, Washington Post, and Scientific American. So welcome, Kasli. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you so much, Janet, for the introduction, and to everyone at Encore for convening this panel today. It's so great to see so many of you on video. I love getting a sense of who's in the room. So this topic of social isolation and loneliness has been really widespread and prevalent since actually before the pandemic. And research has shown that it affects most commonly older adults at one end of the age spectrum and youth, particularly Gen Z, at the other end of the age spectrum. And the thing about social isolation and loneliness is that they don't just feel bad, they're also linked to quite a big variety of severe health outcomes, things like heart disease, stroke, dementia, depression, and even premature mortality. So it's really, really important that we find creative and consistent ways to connect and to really prioritize relationships in our day-to-day lives. So through a lot of the work that I do, I get to see a broad range of innovation going on in this space, which has really accelerated in recent years. And I'm talking about everything from federal legislation and new technology to programs being implemented in workplaces and schools, all the way to different initiatives led by community members in their local neighborhoods. And one of the approaches that I'm particularly interested in and find very promising is intergenerational connection and creating opportunities for people to make friends across ages. So today I'm very excited to learn more about the work of these 3 innovators who are focused on this approach of intergenerational connection. So our first panelist will be Aditi Merchant, who's the founder of Big and Mini. Our second panelist is Elizabeth Locon, who goes by Lika, and she's the founder and director of Opening Minds Through Art. And finally, Rowena Ritchie, who's the co-founder of For You. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch a short video about each of their work before diving into Q&A. So let's start off by learning about Aditi and her work with Big and Mini.
Hi, my name is Aditi, and I'm the co-founder of Big and Mini, a company that creates meaningful one-on-one connections between young and older adults. Let me tell you where the idea for Big and Mini came from. In high school, I played the flute at a small senior living facility called Querencia at Barton Springs. Every time I visited, I stayed for an extra hour or 5 to get to know everyone there. And with every visit, my conversations with the residents morphed into so much more than a friendly chat. I learned about life in West Germany from Mr. Becker. I heard about Miss Wilson's work as a marine biology researcher. And over time, these intergenerational friendships turned into a constant source of inspiration. I wanted everyone to experience the same kindness and advice I had been given from older generations. This led me to launch Big and Mini. Big and Mini is a platform that connects young adults or minis and older adults or bigs. Through weekly video calls, we allow generations to come together and share stories, laugh, and form friendships. Ultimately, we're working to end loneliness. No biggie. So, how does Big and Mini work? After signing up on our website, our matching algorithm pairs bigs and minis with similar interests. When it comes time for their weekly call, they simply click a link on their dashboard to access the video call. No downloads required. It's from this dashboard that connections that last a lifetime are made. Consider the story of Elva and Daniel. Elva is 74. She signed up for Big and Mini hoping to learn more about global cultures. Daniel is 19. He signed up for Big and Mini hoping to be inspired by someone else's stories. We matched them up on April 27th of 2020. 1 year later, they're still calling every week at Saturday at 9 a.m. sharp. They've cooked lomo saltado, a Peruvian dish, together. They posted a book club about ancient Rome. Just last month, Elva bought Spanish for Dummies so she could learn Daniel's native language. Here they are sharing what they love most about each other.
My favorite thing about you, Elva, is that even if I have, one of my interests that isn't your forte, you still go out of your way to learn about it. Now you're making pollo saltado, probably as good as any Peruvian chef.
The coolest part? All of this has been done straight from the Big and Mini platform. But there are hundreds of more stories like this. 1 year since our founding, we've had over 4,000 Bigs and Minis engage in weekly calls and made over 1,700 matches internationally. We've also been featured on the Today Show, New York Times, and more. If anything, we hope the success speaks to the power of the intergenerational connections we're forming here at Big and Mini. Right now, we're asking that everyone who shares our passion for intergenerational connection reaches out and spreads the word about Big and Mini. It can be with someone who's struggling with loneliness, feeling lost, or just wanting a new friend. We have a dream to make connection accessible to anyone who needs it, anytime, anywhere. We need your help getting there. Join us in ending loneliness, one Big and Mini match at a time. Thanks.
Awesome. So inspiring to see you build this really creative solution, Aditi. So one of the things that stood out to me in this is your focus on accessibility. Anyone can join from anywhere in the world. They don't have to learn a new technology or download an app. It's really, really simple. And I'm curious, before we move into the next video, just what kind of feedback have you gotten from people of both ages about the accessibility and their experiences overall?
So I guess when we started out, we really wanted to make sure, again, that this was something that anyone, regardless of their background, was able to use really easily. So in the beginning, when we started out, we really wanted to kind of define a list of things that we wanted to implement to make sure that it was, easily accessible. And a couple of those were, again, this one-click video call, these options for people who might not have access to computers or video calls, things like that, in order to make sure that everyone could join. And it was a lot of iterations where we were talking with our Bigs and Minis, getting their feedback about, things that they found a little bit difficult to use, features that they'd love to see added in. I know one of the big things that we heard was a lot of our bigs were having friends that might not have had access to computers and wanted a way to use phone calls. So it was kind of a lot of listening to this feedback about ways that we could really make sure that the platform was something that was easier to use, that allowed us to really make this something that was easy to use for everyone. So right now we've been getting a lot of positive feedback now. I think that's one of the cool things that the bigs find about the platform and the minis is just how easy it is to click and use it and talk to someone really from anywhere at any time. So positive feedback, and it's just been cool to see how it's grown and how our bigs and minis have really shaped the experience that Big and Mini offers.
Fantastic. I love the iterative approach you've taken, learning from your users. That's really great. Well, next we're going to watch a video about Lika's work with opening minds through art.
In 2008, I visited a nursing home in Oxford, Ohio as a gerontology graduate student. There I met Cora. She was in her 80s, Cora had advanced dementia and was no longer able to talk, walk, or eat on her own, and she had been that way for some years. But what Cora could do is hold a paintbrush and move it ever so slowly to blend colors and create new colors. This is Cora, and this is Cora's painting. All conversations with Cora were one-sided, me talking to her, but I'll never forget when one day I was kneeling next to her wheelchair, talking to her about a painting, when she slowly raised her hand and touched my head. I stopped talking. Then out of the blue, she whispered, "Sweetie." It was the first time she had spoken in years. The nursing home staff was stunned. I knew something really special just happened. Cora had given me a gift. She came out of her silence to declare her friendship. I wanted to share Cora's gift with other students like me. It was then that Opening Minds Through Art, or OMA, was born as an intergenerational art program that pairs students with people living with dementia. Opening Minds Through Art benefits both sides, and we have research evidence supporting this. 94% of students who experienced OMA became more positive in their attitudes toward people like Cora. The elders showed more interest and more pleasure during OMA compared to traditional activities. OMA's innovation lies in recasting people living with dementia from dependent care recipients to artists capable of creating beautiful artwork, and co-educators inspiring high school and college students. Now, Opening Minds Through Art is established in over 200 communities throughout North America, connecting thousands of students with older people living with dementia. Since 2016, the state of Ohio has recognized and funded Opening Minds Through Art as a program that improves the quality of life in nursing homes. We are now coming to an end in state support for the OMA program. But there's still millions of Coras out there waiting for someone to put a paintbrush in their hands, and millions of students whose minds need to be opened by people like Cora. Won't you help us put them together?
Wow, that's a really moving story, Lika, about Cora. And you shared with us just before the panel that her art is actually on your t-shirt in the font. And I love that. That's really, really neat. So one of the things that stood out to me about that video is the value of reframing people with dementia from dependent care recipients to co-educators and artists who have their own skills and talents and creativity. And I think that's such an important point. Could you share more about your thoughts on reframing more older adults in general to kind of combat ageism in our society?
Yes, thank you. You know, a sense of community and inclusion of people that are different from ourselves is more challenging to build with others that are more different than we are. The bigger the difference, the more challenging the process of building that inclusive community. So in OMA, we work with people living with dementia, and the distance between students and people living with dementia is greater than students and people without dementia, older adults without dementia. So if OMA works for people living with dementia, then it should also work with people who have no dementia because they're more similar to the students. So in fact, in the last 2 terms, we have been doing just that because we could not go to nursing homes. We could not take our students there. So we've been doing virtual OMA where people connect over Zoom, over making art and music and poetry and all these different creative aging activities. And it works. It works for people without dementia because what matters is the authenticity of the social engagement and the artistic experience. So because of that, now we're building Scripps Avid. Avid stands for arts-based, virtual, intergenerational, and dementia-friendly. But it's designed so that people living with dementia can use it, but anybody could use it. So I think by designing things with the most challenge, we can address ageism more broadly.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Lika. So next we are going to see a video of Rowena's work with For You.
A 7-year-old boy places his hand on a piece of red felt, traces it, then cuts around it and carefully stitches it to a pillow. During the pandemic, his grandmother had to give up all physical contact with him and everyone else. And so Wakes made her this pillow. And whenever they would talk on the phone, she would place her hand over his pillow hand, a proxy and a promise of hand-holding to come. My name is Rowena Ritchie, and that is the true story of Wakes Wilner and his grandmother, Sook. Wakes' mom is my dear friend, Erica Chong Shuk, and we're in a performance collective together with our friend Ryan Takata. We're called For You. Inspired by Wakes' hand pillow, For You launched a project called Artists and Elders to serve as matchmakers, pairing elders with artists one-on-one. The two meet and get to know each other, and then the artist makes a gift for and with the elder. Sounds simple, right? But our goals are profound. We're tackling two problems. First is the social isolation of elders, which reached crisis levels during the pandemic. Second is the need to support artists, a critical resource to communicate care, creativity, and connection. One artist in San Francisco, Deirdre Visser, was paired with elder Glenn Stoltz. Because of COVID-19, Glenn couldn't get out, so he would go to his windows to draw. When Deirdre first met Glenn, she said she could sense right away that the best gift she could deliver him was her sustained interest in his art and creative practice. And so, Deirdre helped Glenn mount his first ever public exhibit titled Out My Window, a collection of original paintings by Glenn Stoltz, age 79. The generosity and creativity of all the elders and artists have astounded us. You can see the gifts and creative process on our website. For Sook, Wakes' grandmother, the social isolation was lifted, but for countless others, it is not limited to the pandemic. Deep down, we all want to see and be seen. We all want to feel heard. We all want to give gifts and to receive them. We want someone to say, "This is for you."
Rowena, that was really beautiful. So one of the things you mentioned in the video was about tackling two problems: social isolation among older adults, but also the need to support artists. And what I like about that point is that so much of the value of intergenerational connection is bidirectional, right? It's not just young people helping older people or vice versa. It really is a mutual exchange of value. So could you share a little bit more about some of the feedback you've gotten from older adults, but also from the artists and the value that this has brought to them?
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. I love this question because as I was pondering it, I realized that we've gotten similar feedback from both groups. Both the artists and the elders have expressed feelings of gratitude and being stretched. So for many of the elders, we partner with people who have clinical isolation or chronic loneliness in their lives. And given the task of connecting virtually initially to talk 3 or 4 times with a stranger, to open themselves up to somebody who's not seeing them as a patient or charity case, but as someone who has great stories to harvest, somebody who has life experience that's fascinating and inspiring. That can be rewarding but challenging. Similarly, for the artists, we're tasking them with these 3, over the course of these 3 or 4 meetings, with discovering a gift that would be meaningful to the elder. And in some cases, they have to go outside of their expertise, or the hit that they get is that the gift is something that they don't exactly have the expertise for, but would be the most meaningful. So I don't know if you remember, towards the end of the video, there was a woman holding up a pink figure of a doll. The artist in that case was a Shakespearean trained actor, but she keyed into this story that the older person told her about this doll that had an impact on her, and the elders' commitment to environmentalism, and paired those together to create this doll that really blew the elder's mind. Not only that, but it turned into a conversation piece for the elder, which rippled out more connections and more stories. So that's the sense of gratitude through the gift for these additional contacts that the elder can make. The gratitude also just comes through the social contact. Many elders have said to us that the real gift is having a connection with somebody, a live person on the other side of the phone or the computer. And for the artists, being able to channel their creativity into a kind of creative mutual aid during the pandemic, to have this work, but also to have this meaningful work, was really a gift for them.
That's so terrific to hear. Thank you, Rowena. And I'm curious, Aditi and Lika, have you similarly gotten feedback from your participants that it's beneficial in both directions, and that really this is a mutual exchange? Aditi, perhaps we can start with you.
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely. I mean, when we started Big and Mini, one of the big components of this was making sure that both sides were really benefiting from the process of getting to know each other. And I think we've definitely seen that come to fruition on the side of the young adults, the college students like myself. I mean, you get the opportunity to talk with someone who has this lifetime of knowledge and wisdom that they're willing to share. And I think that's such an incredible experience, especially when you're kind of in this transitional point in your life, and with everything going on with COVID, it's just so valuable to have someone be there for you and to, share this advice that's really going to help you grow as a person. And on the flip side, on the side of our bigs, I think having the opportunity to really talk with someone and get to know someone who has such a different life experience and is kind of going through something completely different is something that's just an incredible experience, regardless of background or age. So I think both sides have definitely really benefited from the opportunity to talk to each other. And in every way, the connections that we create are mutually beneficial. They're not one-sided.
And with the people that we work with, some have the capacity to share wisdom and stories and things like that to generate the kind of benefit that Aditi was describing. But we also have people who are cognitively impaired to an advanced degree that they cannot share stories. But even with those people that are not able to remember things or even speak verbally, students learned a great deal. So one of the important study that we've done is called allophilia, which means liking of the other. And liking of the other is not the same as not being prejudiced or tolerating them or accepting them. It's genuinely liking, positively liking the other. And students who went through OMA, whether in person or virtual, they come to like older adults more. They are feeling affection, they're feeling kinship toward older adults who may not remember them or recognize them. And this is based on studies of 200 some OMA students versus 500 compared to 500 students who didn't go through OMA. So they're completely benefiting from these interactions. And once students see people living with dementia or older adults in general in this way, they cannot unsee it. And this kind of transformation in one's worldview cannot be achieved if we stay inside the classroom or inside our own social bubbles. So this is the benefit to the students. And for people living with dementia, they have a new friend that's outside their family, that's outside their normal circle of social world, and they show greater well-being during OMA when compared to other activities. And it's the highlight of their week, really. They look forward to all the students coming to the nursing home. So definitely both sides benefit.
That's wonderful. So we had a question in the chat that ties into something I wanted to ask each of you, which is about what you've seen to be effective and successful for structuring these intergenerational interactions, whether that's conversation prompts or training, what you've seen successful, but also perhaps one challenge that you've encountered with these connections. So Rowena, why don't we start with you? And I'd love to hear from each of you.
One of the biggest challenges is knowing how to end. So unlike with Big and Mini, we ask for a specific number of meetings. So 3 or 4 meetings is the engagement. And part of that is because we're giving micro commissions to the artists and we don't want to extend it beyond what we think is a fair commission. But because the invitation to create a gift is very open-ended, sometimes the gifts that they come up with far exceed what you could actually accomplish in 3 or 4 meetings. And they, to use the expression, go off the rails with a project. Someone developed a website for somebody. Someone else made a time machine as a gift for their elder. And these projects were extremely invested in this work. We don't want to get in their way, but we also don't want them to feel like we're taking advantage of them. Also, the relationships get deeper and deeper. And again, sometimes the relationship exceeds the 3 or 4 meetings that we require for the engagement. And then eventually it feels like a responsibility to stay in close contact with this new friend. So one of the effective ways that we've addressed this challenge is by creating an artist's brief, where we, based on this experience, have really established, like from the onset of when you're first matched, really establish those boundaries, really let each other know what to expect. In 4 meetings, there will be a culminating gift. We will exchange it, and that will be the end of this engagement. And that way, if anybody has resistance to doing that, they can decline to participate at the beginning stages.
Lika or Aditi, would you like to share next?
For me, the difficulty, the biggest challenge is the general cultural perception that art and creative expression is a nicety and not a necessity, not a fundamental human need. So this then leads to a related challenge, which is funding. If it's just some fluff that is nice to have, then the funding becomes more difficult than doing something in medical field, for example. And then another challenge is staff turnover, because to run this program, we need to train nursing home staff, and it takes about 20 hours to go through OMA training. And then once they're trained, they leave, then there's no program. So that's the challenge, and I don't have a solution to these challenges. So I can't say this is a challenge and then we've already addressed it. But something that's really effective for us is a training program. We have about a 2-hour training program for students before they meet the older adults. And we've used this training program with medical school students, nursing students, in order to get them to become a better healthcare professional. And we found that they do improve in their attitudes towards older people and more likely to choose older adults as a population that they would work with. But I don't think that's because of the training, but that's because the combination of the training and the one-on-one time with the older adult in the program. So that's effective. And then the fact that we've replicated the program in over 200 communities, I think the staff training is also effective, but that still doesn't address the problem of cultural perception that this is something nice to have, but not necessary.
I guess I can go ahead and jump in. On the perspective of big and mini, I think one of the challenges that we face is kind of sort of the opposite of Rowena, in the sense that it's usually the beginning that's the hardest for us. The initial connection and making sure that everyone feels really comfortable going into the call, knows exactly what to expect, and has that reduces some of that tension that comes from like meeting someone for the first time and wanting to make a good impression on the other person. I think that's always been kind of the hard part for us, is making sure that both people really feel that they're going to be welcome and going to really make a meaningful connection going into the call. And some of the ways that we've addressed that, there's a couple different ways actually. The first is kind of what Lika was saying with the training. Before any of our bigs and minis actually go into the call, we make sure that they know exactly what they're getting themselves into. They go through kind of a video that says like, this is exactly how the tech is going to work, and this is exactly what to expect from this conversation, and here are some things that you can do to make sure that it flows smoothly. That way no one has any of that anxiety going in and like wondering, is my mic going to work? Is my camera going to work? That kind of stuff. And another thing that we do is just with conversation prompts. Sometimes it's just hard to think of things to say on a conversation, especially when you're just starting out. So making sure that there's couple topics that you can kind of just bounce out and make sure that you can use to get the conversation flowing is another thing. And then finally, just matching people up based on similar interests, because if you have something instantaneously that that you share with someone that you have in common, it's a little bit easier to at least just bring that up as an initial point of connection, use that as kind of your launching point for creating this really good friendship moving forward. So that's kind of what our challenges look like.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully all these insights from your different programs are helpful to anyone listening in who's considering starting an intergenerational program, or even just wants more intergenerational friendships in your own life. So each of you have either started your programs during the pandemic, or certainly had to adapt your programs to the constraints of the pandemic. And so I'm curious, as you envision the next 5 years in hopefully a COVID-free world, I'm curious, what is your vision, and what do you hope the programs will evolve into in the coming months and years? And Rowena, let's start with you again.
I hope it looks really different. We're performance makers. And so, yes, we devised this during the pandemic, virtually using Zoom as a sort of Band-Aid for the moment. And it's been incredible, and I don't regret that this is the shape that it's been, but we're already designing and planning for in-person, public-facing, participatory performances that mine the jewels of these artists and elders, some specific dyads and some of the gifts, and sort of develop performance around them, with an invitation for the audience to get to know the artists and elders, be in space together using the tools of performance. We know touch is so essential to fostering intimacy and connection. So we're really looking forward to that, but also centering the work around isolated elders' insights into how to bring people into the community, not only out of the pandemic, but people, like you said, who have been struggling with isolation pre-pandemic. What would help them feel comforted and supported as they come into the community? And how can we use that as an educational tool for a broader public to get us all to a place where we're better off than we ever were before?
Wonderful. Lika, over to you.
For us, the pandemic created a challenge that led to the development of the virtual version of OMA, which is we're calling Scripps Avid. So in fact, the pandemic is going to give us a whole new way to reach out more people. So after the pandemic is over, we're going to go back to the traditional face-to-face in-person OMA, but we're also going to have a virtual version, which we're calling Scripps Avid, in order to reach more people, connect more young people and older people. And then it's going to be designed, like Aditi said, you know, overcoming the technological barriers so that anyone can use it. So in a way, we would not have come up with this idea or this experimentation if we didn't have the pandemic. So
that's great. I've heard that actually from a lot of programs that are tackling social isolation and loneliness, that as a result of the pandemic and the constraints that it caused, it's actually, they've been able to reach many, many more people. So that's really exciting to hear. And Aditi, what about you? Are you thinking of having in-person options as well in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting because Big and Mini actually started during the pandemic. So really all we've known is these virtual connections, which has been really cool to see because one, you have these connections that are not only generational, but also cross-cultural and really come from different backgrounds. But at the same time, there is something special about, you know, being in front of someone and having that face-to-face interaction and actually being able to hear what they're saying, not through a screen. So looking forward, something that we've been really looking towards and planning for is just having this option to really meet in person and make sure that we can do that in a safe and structured way, just like the online conversations are happening. So doing things such as like Big and Mini groups within cities where we'll host like a social for any Bigs and Minis located within a city to come and meet each other and, you know, have a coffee or interact with each other directly in person, or even offering ways for Bigs and Minis to be matched up with a mini or a big in their local area. That way they can have this option for in-person meetups if they'd like. So yeah, really just kind of bringing that extra dimension to the Big and Mini meetups while also still maintaining that core, you know, platform of accessibility to make sure that everyone can access it. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, I look forward to attending a Big and Mini mixer in the hopefully soon future.
Hopefully soon.
Well, thank you so much to each of you. This has been so insightful to learn about your different programs. And thank you for the very important work that you're doing to reduce loneliness and create these intergenerational friendships and connections. We are now going to transition into breakout rooms where we will all have a chance to reflect on what we've just heard and share kind of what inspired us and what the takeaways are, as well as perhaps share the work that you're doing in your communities to reduce loneliness, but also create intergenerational connection. So we are going to head over to them in a second, and we have a couple prompts to spark discussion ideas. You're free to use them or to take the conversation in ways that you find interesting. But the first prompt is to introduce yourself. So share your name, location, and perhaps one way that you've stayed connected during the pandemic to start to get to know each other. And then the second prompt is, what have you seen done to combat social isolation and loneliness in your community? And are any of those intergenerational? And talk a bit about kind of what you're seeing locally. So with that, we will head into breakout rooms. You should see a pop-up on your screen, and just make sure to hit OK.
Thanks, everybody. I hope you had a good conversation in your groups. It inevitably, someone always kind of gets cut off mid-sentence, which I think is a good sign that there's some healthy conversation going on. So I'm just kind of curious to hear what you talked about in your group, specifically what you might be taking away with you. So I invite you in the chat if you want to share a couple of things, whether it's from the conversation that we had earlier with Kasli, Aditi, Lika, and Rowena in the beginning, if that's something, if there was a seed there of something you'd like to take with you or something from your small group conversation, I'd love to just hear what people have on their minds. There has been a question, and I saw it earlier in the chat, about how people can get involved with the three organizations who we heard from. I just wanted to direct everyone, I think Steph, my colleague Steph, put in Encore's website and also a link to the Fellows page, which will get you connected to their organizations, Again, if you wanted to watch their video and kind of check out their specific asks or look at the work our other fellows are doing, that's there as well. So as people are putting things into the chat box around things you might be taking with you, whether that's seeds of inspiration. I know in our group, we were sharing a lot about how we're connecting with our neighbors and our own kind of feelings of loneliness and what gives us meaning and joy. So we were sharing some resources in our group. If that came up for you, I'd love to hear it. But I also just wanted to say a big thank you to Kasley Killam for moderating our conversation today, Aditi, Lika, and Rowena for all the amazing work that you all are doing. I see that Lika put in her contact information and others are there as well. So if you want to get involved, if you are doing intergenerational work yourself and want to share your organization's website, please do that in the chat. So as we go out, just thank you so much for joining us today. Duncan is going to put up a quick poll so you can tell us your experience of the session as we think about whether future sessions like this would be helpful. So thank you so much and hope to see you soon.